on this show, and they have had their personal learnings along their entire journey, and I believe these learnings can impact the life of someone outside their immediate circle. Our topic for today is workplace bullying and its impact on psychological safety. And if there is one person in the world that I would like to model my career path with, that would be Dr. Sujaya Banerjee. And why do I say that? Dr. Banerjee has had a vast career working with corporates, working with various having being a CEO of her own organization. She is the founder of Learning and OD Tables Roundtable, which is a non-profit knowledge forum with a worldwide membership of 50,000 members. Absolutely stunned by these numbers. She has also been at the groundswell in terms of being part of Harvard Learning and Innovation Lab, where they were crafting psychological safety. So, the best person to talk about psychological safety and its impact on organizations. She has also been listed as the top 40 HR professionals in Asia and won the Youth Icon Award. She's also listed as Asia's 100 women power leaders in 2023. In addition to all of this, she's also a TEDx speaker. She runs a podcast, which is In the Lead, where she does the similar thing that we're doing now, that is, talk to extraordinary leaders who speak about their leadership journey. With this, I'm extremely privileged to welcome Dr. Sujaya Banerjee, and thank you once again for being part of this podcast.
Thank you, Jonas, for that very glorious introduction. I'm really looking forward to this conversation today.
Okay, most podcasts have a rapid fire round towards the end. And frankly, that's the best part of the conversation. So we'll flip the script and we'll do a rapid fire with Dr. Sujay Banerjee. Okay. What's your favorite work phrase and why?
I think it's actually an adage, which is heights of great men were not reached in a flight when their comrades were asleep; they were toiling through the night. Which is
Okay.
to encourage and inspire people to work harder and
Okay.
to chase their dreams and to not benchmark with people who may not be working as hard to achieve what they want.
Wonderful. It's such a powerful phrase, and everyone can actually embody it in their career. What's your go-to interview question that you ask?
So, interestingly, I don't like the question, tell me something about yourself. I think it's a very weak question and it is not going to allow you to actually understand the candidate at all. So, I have two, three favorites, right? So, I ask them to describe the time they've had the best time ever on the job, right? So, describe a high point experience on the job is
Mm.
usually a go to question. I also like them to describe somewhere in the interview the best manager they've ever had and why.
Okay, so great. So then it talks about something that they have achieved as well as who did they work with and what was that dynamics like.
Yeah, so when are they the happiest? I think it's very important to understand that.
Yeah.
And what is really giving this individual a kick? You know what I mean? When is this person going to be at their best? And
Mm.
if you can recreate, and if you think your organization is capable of recreating those best experiences, then maybe this is your candidate. Also, what do they look for in a manager so that
Mhm.
we can figure out how we must motivate and sort of, excite this person about what it is that our journey is all about. And it's always useful because whoever is going to be the manager of this person, we've got some inputs on what's it's going to take to manage this person. And
Wonderful.
yeah, so the idea is how do we create happy moments at work?
Mhm.
I have a big challenge with how work is seen as drudgery and work is seen as boring and work is seen as, oh God, I don't want to
Mhm.
go another day. I mean, I have a career spanning 33 years and I've never missed the skip in my step to go to work. Whether I've
Mhm.
worked for the corporate world, worked in five different geographies, and now I work for myself. And I think that that skip in the step is so important. You're spending so many hours there. You have to find it's not going to always be high point experiences, but it's going to be important to have enough of them to keep you going.
Wonderful. Okay. If you can instantly master any skill, what would that be?
I mean, currently it's artificial intelligence. I want to know how AI works in the context of improving your productivity. So there are two IITians who are offering a program around this Sunday, and I've enrolled for it. And so I never stop. I mean, I keep telling people, oh, I'm a migrant to technology, and they look at me and say, doesn't look like at all. We're just about to launch a subscribe tech platform, and it's been my idea, and a lot of effort for execution, because I think that our generation always, and I think it's a good thing sometimes to think you're on a bit of a back foot because you didn't think tech as solutions in your own prime time professionally.
Yeah.
And so then you take extra effort to learn it, you take extra effort to excel and you at it, and you take extra effort to make sure that it's always an area of doubt and you're tentative around it so that you really master it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So, what's your favorite productivity hack or time management tip?
So I'll tell you what, there's something beautiful called the things to do list. And I find most people think it's nothing, and you take notes in different places, and then you don't quite know what it is by the end of the day that you're actually chasing.
Yeah.
I obsess with the things to do list. I think the universe conspires with people who have a things to do list. You will most certainly achieve most of it magically because you've written it down. And
Yeah.
because you're revisiting it so many times during the day, I also recommend write it. There's something about writing it that makes you remember it. So,
Yes.
things to do list is my best hack.
And this is a segue to what our topic is, but
Yes.
describe your ideal work environment in 3 words.
Yeah. So I think experienced an ideal work environment when I started my career. So I think ideal work environment is a place where people care about your strengths. So they
Mm.
care to know you and they care about your strengths. They also know how to not put you in situations where what will magnify will be what you're not so great at.
Ah,
So I think both, kind of compassion for both is very important.
yeah.
I also think that the best workplace or the most desirable workplace is one where your manager is challenging you. If the job is too easy, be sure you're not getting anywhere great.
Yeah.
So the fact that someone's raising the bar on you all the time,
Mm.
and you will have those moments where you're saying, really? Like I got asked in the fourth month of joining, can you help us revamp the performance management system? And I'm talking about 1990. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You come straight out of college. How do you revamp this? I'm even just trying to understand what you
Understand.
do in the space of performance management. And I think it was incredible how, I learned how to do that. And I worked with a consultant and we drove what it is that we did. And before we knew it, we had an industry regularly industry benchmark process in the organization where everyone came in to learn.
Yeah.
And these were incredible times that people were so generous to share with other organizations in person what it
Mm.
is that they were actually attempting to do. So I
Mm.
think giving a management trainee that kind of sort of opportunity and that kind of elbow room and that kind of trust, I think is incredibly motivating.
Yeah.
And so I think raising the bar, even if the job's becoming more and more tough, and sometimes you're saying, are these people for real? What are they even asking me to do? And I think that's great.
Yeah.
If you're experiencing that,
Yeah.
I think that's just fantastic. I think the other thing I'm going to talk about is a workplace where you see everyone respected no matter who they are.
Mm.
I think that is my description of an ideal workplace. I never, and I've worked in the infrastructure manufacturing space most part of my life, in the hydrocarbon space, where often I was the only woman or the first few women to be hired and so on and so forth. I have never ever experienced anything short of respect in the workplace. And
Mm.
so, and we were very few of us. So I'm just saying that there could have been doubt, there could have been misogyny, there could have been dismissing of, there could
Yeah.
be, you could be given roles that undermine you, you could be given, like the office housework, if you want to call it that. And I never
Mm.
ever experienced that. Always experienced being treated as a professional, equally competent to any of the men who were employed.
Yeah.
So I think a workplace, an ideal workplace, and on hindsight, I find it incredible that it never crossed my mind that they could treat me otherwise. And
Yes.
only from stories that I gathered much later that I felt, my God, I've just been so incredibly lucky.
Mm.
And so I think where people don't even, it's not even a question whether you will get treated well.
Yeah.
And I think that those are the
It's
kind of
hygiene.
workplaces I've experienced. So where everyone gets treated well, no matter what. And I've been in multi ethnicity environments.
Mm.
So you have people who from Africa, you have people who from Azerbaijan, you have people from just about anywhere working around you, and everyone is treated well. Everyone is treated well. If you have a grievance, you feel that you did not get an opportunity to learn, or you believe that you didn't fare well that year because you weren't supported, I mean, there was ample opportunity to be able to get compassion around issues like this. They were not treated as, oh, this is such an irritant, and why are you coming to talk to me about your career and the rest of that, which I hear a lot of people tell me now when I'm coaching people, that they don't have an environment where they can talk about what they expect. They don't have an environment where people are, even if they're part of high potential programs or they're part of succession development, there's a lot of checking of the boxes rather than real mentoring that's going on in terms of transferring of skills. And I think we got so much of that. So, I think I'd like to say that I've experienced those workplaces, and I think it's incredible. I didn't know they were so distinctively rare.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction and just level setting and laying the foundation in terms of what's the normal way. Uh, so we'll move into the questions that we kind of have on the topic. Dr. Sujaya, if you could describe to us what is psychological safety and how does lack of it impact the workplace?
I think it's not difficult to describe what psychological safety is. My question to most people who are, joining us today is to ask: have you been part of a room where somebody senior is addressing the group of people, and he or she asks you all a question, asks the group a question, and all that you're getting in response is silence, and so
Mhm.
no one has anything to say. And it can't be that there you have so much of intellect there in the room, and you have so much of talent in the room, and that no one has anything to say. And I think this is an incredibly common experience that people have, particularly in Indian workplaces. But psychological safety is a challenge everywhere in the world. And I think that the so psychological safety, to answer your question, is basically experiencing or believing in the permission for candor.
Mhm.
So that the fact that you can speak up and speak your mind, and there is not going to be any kind of interpersonal challenge or a career risk as a result of speaking up. And having that kind of culture where you can call out discordant information without being blamed, tagged, or basically having a career risk, like I said, or even an interpersonal risk, where also teams feel comfortable to be able to confront each other, maybe sometimes where there isn't the right information being presented,
Mhm.
without it uh, dwindling into a conflict. So
Mhm.
you don't misunderstand, but you clarify to understand. And where you have those kind of sort of dynamics where it's okay to be able to call out what you want to call out, and it's okay for you to be able to share what you want to share. So when I talk about the permission for candor is what we're talking about. When we're saying I feel safe, which means I believe I have the permission for candor. um, what you miss when you don't have it is that you're not going to know what this person's thinking. You're not going to know how many people in the room are saying, oh my God, just don't do that, that's so wrong, this is not the right strategy, or this isn't the right solution. You're not going to get access to competitor intelligence. You're not
Mhm.
going to get access to um, maybe some insights that people at that level in the organization have. Maybe market intelligence, customer intelligence, competitor intelligence, whatever it is that the person has access to is not being brought into the room. And so you're lacking for that. And the decisions that you will make will be suboptimal because you have not accessed both the insight, the ideas, and the solutions that reside tacit in the minds of people.
Yeah.
And so, in sum total, you have people that you've hired in the organization, and you perhaps, evaluated them against high standards, but you're not getting value for their talent or their experience or their insights because you have not created an environment of safety for them to speak up.
Mhm. Yeah, the lack of it in the workplace also translates to, um, at least in my current organization's issues related to safety, because you have that inherent knowledge of how a product works, how it functions, and when you are talking about an approach, then that inherent knowledge needs to also be shared with everyone so that we make the best decision. That helps the organization. So certainly does impact essentially the way the organization functions if you look at it
Mm.
at scale.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah. So that's an impact on How do we, so just transitioning into that, how can we ensure a better psychologically safe place at work?
So I think to begin with, you need to sensitize managers of people or whoever has more power within the organization, to understand what the implications of not having this voice are within the organization. So you don't access the real talent that people really have. You're not accessing information across levels within the organization that is crucial to make meaningful decisions. So, which means you're making suboptimal decisions because you don't access that.
Hmm.
Three is that anyone who's not feeling safe cannot be at their best in terms of their output or their performance. So their contribution is hampered when they're not feeling safe in an environment. A lot of people stay for various reasons, because they need the job, because they can't change it now, proximity to home, other challenges that you have. So you can't create one more variable in your life. At this point, this brand's great, so I still want to be here. The compensation's good, so I want to be here. It's terrible when people want to stay only because of those reasons, and we created or compel them to believe that that's the only value proposition that they have within the organization. What I'm trying to invite managers to consider is that when you create psychological safety in the environment, what you're actually telling employees is that we trust you. When you give voice to people within the environment, what you're actually telling them is that I value what you're thinking, I value what you want to say, I value your insight. Other than the fact that a whole lot of risks that organizations experience, whether there's it's a risk, it's a financial risk, or whether it's an information risk or any other risk, you don't just land in these risks. You can prevent them if you gave people the safety to speak up. So a
Hmm.
lot of challenges or disasters can be averted if you actually give people the power to be able to speak up. I think the other piece which I think is important to consider is the fact that so many people believe that there is going to be a career risk for speaking up in our workplace. And it's because they know enough of examples. When we're coaching some of these people, you're trying to give them a counter perspective, and they come back saying, no, it happens. And, I know this person, and, this person spoke up, and, they didn't get included in something, or there was something, some form of career limitation that was created for them, or suddenly they want the people in the inner circle, all kinds of things. And so there is a belief across the organization, because they see examples, that when you speak up, you're going to, and if you speak up, especially with any form of discordant information, you don't know where that's going to go.
Hmm.
So you can imagine, when you don't open yourself up to discordant information, and I'm saying all information that need not be discordant, it could be very valuable in terms of change, in terms of innovation, in terms of product improvement, in terms of working on client feedback, in terms of keeping up with competition. It could just mean a lot of positive things. But I'm saying, when you don't open yourself up to discordant information, you lose your opportunity to be able to drive change. You lose your opportunity to raise the bar of performance. And what you're also telling your people is that don't tell us the bad news. And I
Yeah.
think in most organization, there is a high level of discomfort if you call out anything that's not working. And I can tell you, as a consultant coming in from outside, recently I had an experience talking to someone where we said that if you um, that as an outcome of the discovery we would do, there would be opportunities to be able to change the way in which you're managing this. And
Hmm.
there was such a aversion to the word change. And there was so much of resistance around this idea that you'll come back to us with information to be able to do things differently. The point I'm making here is that these are, and it has absolutely nothing to do with age, by the way. It's a worldview. You experience fixed mindsets just about anywhere. And I think that not wanting to listen to what your employees want to say is the most prominent demonstration of fixed mindset, which is, I don't want to listen to what you're saying. I don't want to know the bad news because it makes me look bad. I'm not interested in feedback because I plan to never work on it. So, you know what I mean? So I think that it's all of that. And I think it definitely impacts trust. It impacts your ability to work closely with people. And how can you innovate if you don't give people voice?
Correct.
How can you innovate if you don't want to listen to the discordant information? Yeah,
Yeah.
how can you innovate when people around don't trust each other?
Mhm.
So I find it very concerning that just what everyone's talking about innovation without caring about the kind of culture they've created around them. You know, you can talk about innovation till the cows come home. You're not going to get there because you will not find creative problem solving if you're not enabling people to be able to speak up. I think also valuing the fact, and I think this also comes from the transition from the from the previous era to current to leading current generations, is that we're leading people from the information era.
Correct.
So you may not have high levels of experience in young people who are coming in, or even on people who have 4 or 5 years of experience, 8 years of experience. I think the point is to not count the years, but instead to value their ingenuity and the
Mm.
fact that they do have access to information and practices from other organizations, that they do talk about this, they do think about this, that they might read on their own and get to know what's happening. All of this is available now. You know, you're not in a dark box. You're actually, you can access all this information, and I think it's important to recognize that and to be able to value that we're not leading people who don't know. Yeah, there is a lot of intellect there, and there's a lot of knowledge about the organization that is residing at different levels. And how are you going to mine that if you don't create an environment where and you get access, and you get access from people who are dealing with customers day in and day out. I'm amazed at the limited interactions a lot of very senior people have with the front line. I think there is
Mm.
incredible information that is embedded in the front line, and incredible information embedded in people who work in locations. So I also think there's kind of a very narrow perspective that develops when we don't widen the net in terms of who all's voice do we want to include and listen to. So there's multiple benefits of being able to do this.
Mm.
And how does it work to have a group of people who are scared all the time of the consequence of what they said? What may happen as a result of this, that the boss may not like me, I may not get included in the next meeting. This is not useful from any dimension.
Yeah.
We employ people. Many organizations have great compensations, great titles to be able to bring people in, and then they're not leveraging this voice. And team meetings at most times dwindle into the groupthink phenomena. Most people are waiting to hear what the senior most person's saying, and then everyone's alluding to that. And that is so limiting. It's limiting in terms of the sheer knowledge, ingenuity, talent, energy that is available in the room. And it's also suboptimal to a very significantly unbelievable level when you want to listen to just one voice when you may have an entire team of people in the room. And this phenomena is not just Indian; it happens in different parts of the world. And I think this alluding to these power centric environments. I think in our country it gets magnified because our macro ethos is power centric as well,
Yeah.
but it's
So
limited.
on
Lacks
that point,
simplicity.
Dr. Sujaya,
Yeah.
very interesting question. Neeraj Mehra kind of has asked this.
Mm,
How do you nudge leaders with a fixed mindset
mm,
without offending them? You touched upon the cultural
yeah.
nuances, the
Yeah.
power distance, especially in an Asian culture.
Mm,
So most people are worried about
yeah.
how do I say something or present something which may be
Yeah.
contrarian without
Mm,
offending the person.
yeah. And I think, I think Neeraj is asking this question, and I think it's a very interesting one. And so, Neeraj, you're basically saying when I don't have power in the equation, you have more power. And you seem to be a fixed mindset person, who is committed to your own perspective. You don't want to know the alternate perspective. You don't want feedback on something that's not working. How do I then get you to do this? And while the answer is a little longer, but I'll just kind of focus on a couple of things so that, for the sake of the conversation we're having today, you still have something to think about. I think something that everyone needs in these times, especially people who are going to be working with senior stakeholders or a huge amount of diverse kind of stakeholders, I think it's very important to develop social intelligence. And what I mean by that is that not everything needs to be told in a magnified, discordant manner in which we're actually saying it. Not everything needs to be told as if the other person doesn't know it, or they don't understand it, or you should understand, I'm closer to the customer, I know this. So I think it's also the style. And most importantly, I think social intelligence is to understand the unspoken rules when you're talking to someone. And the more you master this, I can't see anything that's more important, especially when we are talking about influencing people in the 21st century. I think one I would place huge weightage on is listening, and the other one I would say social intelligence. And social intelligence would also involve listening. But I'm going to say, how do you nudge people, let them know what you want to say without making them feel bad?
Yeah.
And how do you get them to be able to see it as another way in which we could perhaps do things, or you do your homework to be able to tell what the outcomes might really be? It's a very complex, disruptive environment. I can't imagine even those with fixed mindsets not wanting to make a contribution or not wanting to actually succeed. Their fixed mindset is in their way. And so I think working around people who have more authority and power than you, and like you like rightly said, use a nudge. And the nudge comes, and the way in which you use that nudge skillfully comes from your own social intelligence. So
Mhm.
I'm going to ask everyone to build that muscle. It's immensely useful in these times.
Yeah, one thing that I found useful when you know you're going to get into a conversation with potential people who are resistive to your idea is to get them one on one before the meeting.
Hmm.
Share your idea with them, understand
Yeah,
in a safe environment what the issue is, and if you can solve for that or have a prepared response.
yeah,
Essentially, making them your advocates because you have kind of reached out to them personally to take their inputs, etc.
yeah, yeah,
That's something that I've found
yeah.
useful, especially in navigating a
Yeah,
matrix
yeah,
organization.
yeah. So I couldn't agree more. I think pre-wiring some of this would be a good idea. Maybe turning that into a one-on-one, so they don't have the embarrassment of not knowing something, and it's only between you and them.
Correct.
Data and analytics can help tremendously to be able to make your point, because then it's now not an argument between your and your manager's perspectives, but data is saying what it is saying, and it's objective, and so you can make your point. Keeping their sort of seniority intact, right? And to say, sir, aise nahi hai, actually aise hai. And I have this data and I have that. Yeah, this is social intelligence. This is what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's immensely useful, immensely powerful, and I find it as an underutilized skill in workplaces.
Wonderful. Okay. We'll go to the next level. We kind of talked about psychological safety, how it impacts or lack of it impacts.
Mm.
We kind of understood a particular situation. Now, uh, there's a situation where we have heard of this term workplace bullying.
Mm.
So, what is it, and how does it manifest itself in organizations?
So I think that we haven't called it workplace bullying in the past, right? But it is bullying because it often involves, for example, undermining people in the presence of their colleagues, for example,
Hmm.
or abusing people because they haven't delivered their numbers, or they haven't delivered what they promised to deliver, or the timelines have gone awry. Uh, Basically, at and when I'm saying abusing, this is again not an uncommon behavior, and it goes unchecked more often than not. It happens in the privacy with teams. I think also ignoring certain members of the team. And it happens often when you've inherited certain members in your team, or if you believe that they came in through a referral, or you believe that for whatever reason they're not as smart as the others or don't behave like the others or whatever. So there'd be an in group and an outer group, and people just have to grin and bear with being in the outer group, and they don't oftentimes know why they're being treated like that. So excluding people is a very significant way of also bullying them.
Mhm.
Giving people unrealistic timelines to do their work, to complete their work,
Yeah.
and then come down heavily on them and be abusive around not having completed their tasks. I think all of this is extremely unfair. During the pandemic, I saw another one that emerged during that time. There were several instances, but there was one that particularly struck me as quite shocking, which is to call just once in the morning, give the entire team a brief on what needs to get done, and then be unavailable through the day. And so you not answer phones, not respond to WhatsApp messages, not respond to mails. And this went unchecked for months.
Mhm.
And so I think there are two, three things we're talking about here, which is that obviously the individual is working beyond what is the code of conduct within the organization.
Mhm.
Acting like the team's their fiefdom,
Mhm.
and that they're not, they've basically lost track of the organization's badge or what the organization's value systems are and so on. So you're running amok doing what you feel like doing in the way in which you'd like to lead. And very often this grows because it's going unchecked.
Yeah.
And so there is no mechanism, there's no recourse for being able to escalate this to anyone. And again, the fear is that there'll be a career risk if I tell people what I'm really experiencing. So not having mechanisms for that is another challenge. So I'm just going to pause here. This is what it really is. It's basically it's misconduct by someone who has power in the system, and where the system has entrusted the person to be able to manage a group of people. That engagement really involves being responsible for, and actually that's the way it needs to be positioned, is that you're responsible for, as a manager, a group of people we have hired for this particular function, and we pay these salaries. It's your job to get productivity and performance from these people, and make sure you're not hurting, or you're not
Mm.
disrespecting, or you're not abusing any of them in the bargain, in the interim, while you're trying to get this contribution or performance. So no
Correct.
one's being told to go around amok to get performance and contribution at any cost. But when
Mm.
it goes unchecked, it means you're tacitly telling your managers that it's okay, get it for me at any cost, which is do what you need to. You need to kick, you need to shout, you need to scream, you need to yell, you need to abuse. Like, do it if you need to do it. So I think
Mm.
it's a double whammy. Workplace bullying is as much and very significant the responsibility of the organization and its management and its leadership to be able to ensure that there are mechanisms to know how leaders are behaving in the privacy of leading their teams. There must be mechanisms to know that. Very commonly, organizations use the pulse, so that they're not just getting um, and I'll tell you what gets used instead of using pulse and other mechanisms of being able to receive feedback, is that organizations are using 360-degree feedback processes to be able, in the hope that they'll get feedback from all sides for the individual and increase self-awareness for the manager. So there's high well intention when you're trying to do that. I'm afraid that sometimes goes awry, and more often than not, you don't just need this once in a while. You need this on an ongoing basis to know how people are doing. It's not
True.
data you only capture for an exit from an exit interview. Yeah, it's data you capture while people are in the job. And so it's got to be your pulse, and working around your pulse is your mechanism to make people stay, not to lament after people have left.
Yeah.
So, I think there's some of these things that emerge in the context of workplace bullying, but I'd be happy to answer more questions around this.
One thing that you kind of touched, which kind of resonated with me, was on the lack of information.
Hmm.
Because we work in an environment where information is power. And when you are excluded from or ignored from the whole conversation, from information, which makes you unable to perform your job,
Hmm.
which in turn results in lack of performance.
Hmm.
And then you kind of go down that path saying that you're labeled as a low performer.
Yeah.
That's something that is very subtle, but it is, as you described, a form
Yeah.
of bullying, where individuals are intentionally left out of that information, but held responsible for the task. So that's kind of something that, for those who are not aware, and sometimes you also normalize
Hmm.
um, these things. This is what happens in my organization,
Hmm.
and you kind of normalize that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
when you go and experience in another organization and you see that
Yeah.
difference, that's when you realize or understand that
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
something that is not normal.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are different words to put it, but the emotion is the same.
Yes. And I think that, one of the things I've repeatedly been saying to people is that morale is a real thing. Like,
Yeah.
don't imagine morale's a word, or morale's that, yeah, I mean, but what is morale? And, I mean, you should build your own morale and you should motivate yourself. Look, the point is that, even if you hire the most talented person under the sun, but if you break this person's morale, right,
Yeah.
then you don't have a talented person there anymore. If you brought in
Mm.
somebody who's extremely experienced and well versed and is going to come in here and manifest something great for your organization, you can write that off if the person's being bullied and treated badly and the rest of that. You're actually reducing performance, rather than, if you think you're shaking people up and waking people up. I think there's a concept called being the theory X manager, which is believing that people are typically lazy, are not interested in
Yeah.
contributing. And, I'm always urging people to ask themselves the question on who would wake up in the morning and come to work every day to fail.
Mm.
Yeah. And while you may have hundreds of reasons, I know that different strokes for different folks. But by and large, how many of us take responsibility to say that, I want to be able to I want to evoke your intrinsic motivation. I want to understand what really works for you. I want to motivate you. Since you're on board, you're here, you're with us, we want to be able to groom you, teach you, train you, include you, involve you, and get you to start feeling more motivated to be able to contribute. And I'm saying that while all this is required to be able to work with people, especially in the knowledge era, I find people doing quite the converse, which is you're ignoring people. They are excluded from parties and other social events. There's only a small group of people who will go and have lunch together. Those are the people who will get all the best ratings during the year, and the rest are just supposed to bear with this and carry on and wait till they find another assignment, I guess. And to your
Mm.
point, that it gets normalized because a lot of people are surprised when they're in a new workplace that they
True.
can actually be respected. So yes, I've heard people tell me that I couldn't believe it. I mean, the same kind of industry, and people actually respect you. They're
Yeah.
so careful about what they're saying to you, that they're managing how it is that you're feeling around here.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed. I've never been dealt with this kind of sensitivity before.
Mm.
So I
Okay.
think it boils down to compassion, and compassion doesn't come easy to people. And not everyone has compassion in the way in which they've been raised. Compassion also works in a very circuitous way, which is if you believe you've not received compassion, you don't give it to others.
Yeah.
So when you tend to have a culture of bullying, and if someone's experiencing it whatever level within the organization, I'd be tempted to say that that's the style that they experience, and in turn their managers experience and somebody else experiences, and that's the way in which we've defined leadership within our organization.
Okay. So Nitin has asked a question just on these lines.
Yeah.
How do you identify and navigate if an employee misuses the line manager's empathy?
Hmm.
Um, could you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I find it bemusing that that a lot of people believe that, oh, this talk about please be empathetic, be kind, and the rest of that. What are we talking about? This is a workplace, yeah. It's not a club. We've come here together to be able to deliver on goals, and so people should come like professionals. They're getting paid for this. If they've been assigned a job, there isn't a question of, oh, should you get aligned to what the organization is trying to achieve. You better get aligned if you want to be able to contribute. Now, I'll tell you what, as much as this sounds very pragmatic, the truth is that's not how human beings work.
Yeah.
And when you talk about empathy, for example, empathy is not just being goody goody with people and saying, oh, I'm so sorry you can't. Oh, I'm so sorry you missed the timeline. Take another 10 days. You may not have that kind of time. So, the point I'm trying to say here is that the difficult part is how do you combine compassion and accountability?
Mm.
And that is the style of leadership you want in Industry 5.0, which is to learn this. It's tough, but to learn it, which is I will be kind, I will be fair, but I'll draw the line when it comes to contribution and performance.
Totally.
And that we can do everything to be flexible around you, but that doesn't mean there's flexibility around what you've come here to contribute.
Yeah.
So the contribution is not up for question. That
Mm.
continues. We may
Mm.
have different formats in which you contribute.
Mm.
We may have different timelines in which you contribute. There could be something you do. There's one workplace where you can pick the shift you want to come in. You can come anytime during the day, and of course it's an industry that affords you that. And so there's so many people who are couples raising small children, where the husband does the morning shift and the wife's doing the evening shift, and she's coming in a team that typically works the morning. She picks up what it is that they need to do and works through the night, but the organization is allowing them to do it, and not from home. She's doing this from work. So the point
Mm.
I'm trying to make is that there are different ways in which people who want to contribute will contribute. And so the accountability doesn't go while you're being empathetic. And the compassion doesn't go when you're being when the I said the accountability doesn't go when you are being empathetic. And you just because you're being compassionate doesn't mean that you're compromising on output and performance. So I
Mm.
think the idea is how do we combine these two in a meaningful way? And I think that's going to be the new form of leadership. Everyone needs to learn it.
Okay. Anil Kumar has another interesting question. How do you record statement and assess a situation regarding workplace bullying, especially when the management and HR are non-biased to a situation? Essentially, I think what he's meaning is uh, both management and HR are biased, and how do you kind of navigate that situation?
Yeah, and I do know of these kind of situations where basically everyone wants to be in denial of anything that's gone awry, or the manager concerned is too important because the manager is performing well. Is delivering the numbers is crucial to how the organization performs. So there's a tendency to want to overlook things the person may have done. Maybe offline there is a plan to be able to get him a coach or something like that. But prima facie, this won't be addressed because there is a need to retain the individual in the current context, maybe multitudes of current contexts. So it's not uncommon that that might happen. Having said that, organizations that are interested in being fair, respectful, would typically have mechanisms for escalation. And I think when they, especially in an environment where it's a demand side market on talent, I think if you run the show like that, which is where you pretend to have investigations and you have pretend to have conversations around helping individuals who are experiencing any form of angst, abuse, disrespect in the workplace, any form of unfairness, in short, I think organizations will have to do this at their own peril because they're not going to remain attractive to be able to continue attracting good talent to the organization. This gets around, and
Yes,
especially in the age
absolutely.
and time of social media, it is so difficult to not let people know if you're continuously being unfair to groups of people.
Yeah,
So my only submission is that that is the reality. I do know what you're asking and what you're talking about because it's not uncommon. Having said that, I do know of organizations who offline, while they might stand by the manager, which is a terrible decision, that if they do that, they still want to get help for the manager to be able to say, how can we help him improve? Because he's actually a very good performer and maybe ends up with this style. But the fact that you don't take up for employees, or there isn't a mechanism to be able to at least listen to employees to understand what's really going on and to take suitable action and to take tough action. I mean, there are lots of organizations with zero tolerance for all this.
yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
yeah, they probably tell the person that you're very talented, but you don't know how to behave in the context of how it is that we expect leaders to behave. And
Mm,
so you seem to have a style that's basically destructive. And so
mm,
you're a very constructive employee with very destructive behaviors. So, we can try telling you once, twice, but if this is repeating, we can't manage this anymore. So I think there are also organizations increasingly which take a very tough stance. But I do know that the equal numbers who don't want the discordant information will not take a stance against managers who are very productive and are contributing distinctively to the organization's plans. And there are other political reasons because of which sometimes the leaders can't be asked to go, especially if they're very senior and at the top of the rung and so on.
yeah,
Having said that, this is always going to come back to, you lose and erode trust with employees who stay with you. I can
yeah,
tell you
yeah.
that. I've seen this happen. You erode trust with employees who stay with you. So it's a double whammy. You not attract great talent, and the ones who stay, they know that they must not trust you.
Yeah, and that kind of also goes to my next point in terms of when you see that this is an unsafe environment, or when you are experiencing some level of workplace bullying, it's not only you who is impacted, but also the rest of the team,
Oh
because
yeah,
they are seeing signs
yeah,
of it, and they're seeing that there is lack of action or lack of correction, and that kind of spreads throughout the organization, and
yeah,
then everyone is either in fear or not coming forward.
yeah.
So it's not just about the individual; it's about also the people who are impacted around that.
Oh yeah. I mean, and that's why we're talking about culture, right? The way we
Yeah,
do things
yeah,
around here. So how do we behave when somebody, which is a colleague of ours, believes that they got mistreated? And
mm,
if an organization truly believes in equality, then this has not got to do with where the voice came from, which level of the organization the voice came from. It's
mm,
about, we created, our organization manifested a situation where an employee felt undervalued or abused or ill-treated or disrespected. And how do we handle something like that and yet not lose the employee?
yeah,
Right? And how do we tackle that in the context of the counseling, coaching that we're going to be doing with the manager, so that we let them know that you're very talented or you're doing a great job, but your great job is a combination of what you're doing and how you're doing it, and how you're doing it is not acceptable to us. So I
absolutely.
think, and doing this mutually with employees. For example, if you do want to give the manager a second chance, whether do you involve the employee in the conversation? You know what I mean? Which is, are you okay? We're going to counsel him or we're going to coach him, but we are going to make sure we address this. And so, can you trust us and stay back while we try and
Yeah.
work on this?
Yeah.
And I think I'm not sure we have these kind of questions which are laced with equality. And we
Mhm.
need to bring in more of this in the workplace for employees to trust us.
Okay. Another interesting question. This is related to what you had shared in terms of accountability as well as, showing passion for the individual. So Chris Thompson has asked this question. I have high expectations for everyone on my team, and sometimes pushing the team to reach those expectations can come across as bullying. Any thoughts on how to find the balance?
So, I think Chris is asking a very important question, which is, if I have a high performing team and I am a high performing leader, and, the context of the work that we're doing is we need this energy to go after this goal, and, we have to go out there and win the world, and, we have it in us, let's go for this and the rest. And that you're, even when people are raising objections to what they already did the last quarter, and that there's obviously some degree of fatigue that's setting in, you're like, oh, come on, don't be a sissy, go after it, make it happen, that kind of thing. So it does happen that there is this rhythm that you don't want to break. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But I think that the balance comes from being able to also address a few people individually offline to what it is that you're trying to do or say.
Yeah.
And I think the idea being to be able to ask them, how can I help you?
Mhm.
Right? And I'm afraid a lot of high achiever managers don't ask their teams enough on how can I help you. And the idea being, we going for this moonshot goal, but I'm going to, I'm here, I'm right behind you, and I want to be able to make sure that I help each one of you get there, especially the ones who believe that, oh my God, this is so fatiguing. We just did something great last quarter. He's at it again, pushing us to be able to deliver another quarter. And so some of these, and I think it's got to be different strokes for different folks, even if as a team there is a voice, so there is an adage, or there is something that you're calling out as a slogan for everyone to get excited. It's important to work with people individually, because a lot of people experience fear when they have a high performing leader. A lot of people experience anxiety and stress because they may disappoint you. A lot of people believe that they were doing well until now, but now in this quarter, if I fail, this is going to be the end of the story for me. So everyone's at the edge, and it's a high stress environment, and we must recognize that. And not everyone has the mental fortitude for stress. So it
Mhm.
can reduce the experience of the workplace very significantly, and also reduce contribution out of fear. Fear is not a motivator for performance at all. And so, if anyone's trying fear is, it's a given formula to get people to underperform. So,
Mhm.
if we had a little more time, I'd talk about it. It's got to do with the reptilian brain, right? And the fear triggers the reptilian brain, which is basically fight or flight.
Yeah.
And most people choose flight. It
Mhm.
also triggers skepticism in the relationship, and releases cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And what you need when you want people to remain high performing is you want a lot of oxytocin. It's the love hormone, the trust hormone. You need a lot of that. And so I'd recommend, Chris, that you take this up individually with a few who are not feeling as comfortable with your moonshot goals. And I think you must keep with the spirit of what it is that you want people to deliver meanwhile.
Mhm. Okay, wonderful. The next one is in terms of, as a manager, um, I want to create a psychologically safe environment for
Mm.
my team. I may have been doing a good job, I might not have been doing a good job. So, how do I start?
Yeah. So I think that, one of the skills that we all talk about and practice the least is listening. And so, listening is the number one behavior of the new decade, right? The more you listen, whether you're listening to the customer, whether you're listening to your senior stakeholders, whether you're listening to people who are the junior most rungs of the organization, or the more you're listening to people who work directly with you, you're going to stand a better chance to be able to sustain success. And so, listening is the number one skill for the 21st century. I spoke to a group of very senior police personnel yesterday. Yeah, they were IGs and SPs and whatnot. And I was explaining the ask and tell spectrum to them, right? Which is that, when you look at this command and control style, and especially when you're in the police, for example, the whole orientation is command the forces, command them, tell them what to do, farman over farman. We've picked that out. Maybe it's very commonly there across organizations in our country, because, as I was saying, power centric ethos and manifests in command and control. And I was talking about how if you're constantly in your style telling, and oftentimes as a leader you believe you need to tell and you need to tell, you're clearly not doing enough ask. Now, ask does two things. Ask gives you a chance to be able to listen to voice, meaning you get voice, you evoke voice. And it also gives you a chance to be quiet and now listen. And so ask. And I remember somebody very senior in the room, and we were just doing a round robins to say what struck you about the conversation today. And he just raised his hand and he said, I'm just so enthused with this insight. I'm going to just do the ask from tomorrow
Yeah.
because I know exactly what was going wrong. And this is groups of people who handle situations that have, significant variables, far more complex, complicated scenario to be able to, sort of deliver and contribute in as compared to the business environment. And he's saying that I'm going to do the ask. And the ask gives you a chance to not just bring in voice, but to also listen. And so I'm going to say listening is a very powerful tool. It is your behavior and you got to be able to alter it. The second thing I'm going to talk about in the context of building a culture of psychological safety is to be able to watch for body language when you say something. And I think that we miss many cues. And that's why I'm saying social intelligence so important. Just watch what it is that these people, how they're reacting, what's their body language, how are they giving you eye contact, what's the discomfort. They're looking restless in their chairs, you're telling them what you're telling them. It's extremely important to pick on those cues to know that you're not creating the impact, or what you just said may not sit really well, or there are things people aren't telling you. And so you don't want to be you don't want to be in a situation where people don't tell you. And lying has an error of commission and an error of omission. So when people are also not telling you, they're basically withholding information from you. And so you don't want to be in that situation as a leader. So I'm going to say watch for body language and cues. The third one, and I think this is very underutilized in workplaces, which is the power of being the leader as a teacher. So, you want to reduce power distance with people who are around you. You want to reduce fear. A lot of us will say, well, when I'm talking to leaders, they're sometimes telling me, why are they so scared? I mean, I don't understand it. I'm not doing anything but to evoke this, right? I mean, it's their problem if they're scared, isn't it? I mean, maybe that's how they've internalized or got conditioned on how they deal with authority figures. And while all of this is true, it's true that individuals as adults need to own why they're feeling so scared, why they're not speaking up. This is as much the responsibility of individuals. But when you are holding the reins of a team together, you don't want that behavior. It's suboptimal for performance. You must believe that. And so create the environment to be able to get people to not be so scared to be able to speak up. Maybe all that they say is not so great, but you still want to listen to it. And it builds trust. Listening creates, listening's like a balm, by the way. You know what I mean? When you listen to people, it's amazing how people believe that because you're listening, you're agreeing with them, and you may not actually, but you give you yeah but you get them to suddenly trust you because you're listening to them. And so listening is a very, very powerful behavior. And in the second one I said was look out for body language. The third one is around leader as teacher. And I think that the minute you see your leader as a teacher, the fact that he or she gave you feedback that was not great, you're disappointed with that feedback, it was discordant, you can tell the person that because the person's teaching you, and you respect the person for what they know, you respect the person for the expertise the person's bringing in, that entire equation becomes different. Suddenly the appetite for feedback increases, the appetite to improve increases, because you want to show your teacher that you're doing well and you're faring well and acting on that feedback. At the senior most levels, people engage with and connect with the genuine authentic affection of a teacher. And so I'm going to urge everyone to bring out the teacher in you, because sitting inside every professional is a teacher. And I'm saying bring that aspect out in the way in which you're going to connect and create lots of oxytocin in your conversations with people. So I think that's a very powerful way to create psychological safety, because then they can tell you anything that sounds silly. They can tell you anything which they think is, oh, because otherwise they'd hold themselves back to say, oh my God, he's going to judge me. But the minute you're a teacher, I don't think you're judging me. I'm literally just telling you what I'm feeling right now. And we can pass on to be able to do what it is that we're trying to do and achieve together. And I can look bad in front of you and not feel bad about it. I can
Yeah.
look back in front of you and not feel embarrassed about it. So leader as teacher is such a powerful concept, and I believe we have not even we have not even scraped the surface of this in Indian workplaces.
Hmm. No, there's so many good points in this. One thing that kind of struck me was, at the start of a meeting, um, we always ask everyone how you're doing. Um, One thing that a leader can also do is towards the end of the meeting, ask people, what have you learned, or what, essentially, what have you learned, or what did you notice at
Hmm.
the end of that conversation.
Hmm.
A
Hmm.
simple question like that
Yeah.
can reinforce whether people were actually listening or not.
Yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely. I
that,
think whether they were listening or not, or whether they're with you on what it is that you're
correct,
going to do.
correct.
Yeah. And I think also to watch for the body language, when they really like what it is that we're going to be doing, or it's building on each other's ideas and it's now creating this energy. And I think that's the fun for which people should come to work, frankly,
Yeah.
which is everyone's intellect is being leveraged and being tested and challenged and all of that, and you're getting a chance to be able to do it. And I'm saying, I know that this can't happen every day, but the
Mm.
point is that if you have enough of these high point experiences, it makes coming to work worth your while. I was going to give you another hack around how do you create psychological safety, but I'm just a little worried about the way in which it goes in many places. And so creating divergence in the room is a great idea, which is,
Mhm.
bring in everyone's ideas. Don't present yours first, right?
Correct.
And it's a bit like the Mintos pyramid. You know what I mean? You kind of bring in many of the details much later. You just kind of bring up the theme first
Yeah.
and bring people in to be able to say what they want to say, and then maybe you bring up what it is that you want to say at the end. The only malpractice I've seen around that is that the leaders who open up the discussion and then close it by telling people, giving people instructions on what they want them to do, disregarding the
Defeats the
entire
purpose.
divergence that just happened for 1 hour.
Yeah.
And I think that's the fastest way to lose your team and their interest in wanting
True.
to participate in discussions with you.
True. True. So I can see by the number of claps, the likes, the thumbs ups that people are enjoying the conversation. I know we can go on and on because this is such an interesting topic, and I'm just surprised that 60 minutes just went by like a breeze. The one thing that I would like to ask you, Dr. Sujaya, is how do people reach out to you? How can they connect with you?
Yeah,
After this,
sure.
how
Right. So, I bring about 3 decades of experience. And like I was saying to someone when we were discussing ageism, is that age is equal to your ability to remain relevant, your ability to learn to remain relevant no matter which era you're existing in. And I'm actually alluding to Linda Grattan's 100-year life, which
Mhm.
is everyone who's on the call today is going to live to be at least 80 years old. And so
Mhm.
you have 30 years on the other side of your career, yeah, or 20 years on the other side of your career. And so, what are you going to do with this one wonderful life you have? And so, what I have up on my vision board is to be able to positively impact 100,000 professionals. And I'm doing that with the government, with academia, with NGOs, and very significantly with business organizations. And so, my organization is called Capstone People Consulting. We work with over 130 organizations across industries, and we do work in the space of capability building for leaders, workplace culture change, change management, future of work cultures. These are some of the areas in which we work. We have a mid-career capability building brand called Pinnacle Learning, which is also doing some wonderful work with people managers. So yeah, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me at Sujaya at the rate capstonepeople.com. So Capstone People Consulting is the name of the organization, and Pinnacle Learning LLP is the name of the second organization. I am also the founder of the Learning and Organizational Development Roundtable, which has almost 50,000 members across the world. This has been an in person forum till before the pandemic, and then it turned into online masterclasses. We've now launching on the 6th of October, launching an online communities of practice. This becomes Asia's first and Asia's largest communities of practice. So I welcome all of you who want to continue learning and learning from the community. That is the only way to learn in disruptive times, which is you build on each other's intelligence and we co-create solutions together. So I welcome you to join the LNOD Roundtable. It's called the LNOD Communities. From after 6th October, it'll be available as a website link, and it's available on the app stores on both the iOS and the Android app stores. You can download the app. I'm very excited to bring this to the community. So come in and make the community count.
Wonderful. And so wonderful to hear that it's a tech first platform. It's
Yes.
there as an app, it's there as a website. Anywhere you need your information and learning, it's available. So thank you so much, Dr. Sujaya Banerjee. It was a real pleasure.
Same here.
And yeah, wonderful,
Thank you for
wonderful
having me.
having you.
Thank you, Jonas, and thank you, the audience, for joining in and for all the questions that you asked. And yeah, continue staying in touch on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer questions there if in case they didn't get answered here. So look forward.
Perfect. Okay.